Imagine this. You find yourself in a heated conversation. The stakes are high, and the tension is palpable. Every word seems to hit harder than the last. Every sentence is crafted with the intent to outwit or outshine. You brace yourself, eager to defend your stance, thinking, "This is the moment I show I'm right." But as the discussion continues, a strange thought arises. What if the real power lies not in winning this argument, but in something else entirely? Enter the philosophy of N, who looks at these moments from an entirely different perspective. He doesn't jump into the fray to join the battle of words. Instead, he offers an unsettling thought. The moment you engage, you've already lost. What does that mean? You're fighting, you're defending your beliefs, you're pushing to make sure your voice is heard. How could that be a loss? For N, real power doesn't come from outshining others in an argument. It comes from a deeper control. It's the ability to stand back, understand the situation, and choose your moves wisely. This concept flips everything we think we know about influence and strength. Let's dive into the philosophy of N, where silence speaks louder than words, and true power isn't won through victory, but through mastery of the moment. Most people think power comes from winning, from being right, from conquering a conversation. We've all been there, caught in the back and forth of a debate, determined to prove that our perspective is the right one. We argue, we defend, we speak louder and faster, thinking that victory lies in the words we throw at each other. But N had a completely different view. To him, real power isn't in proving someone else wrong. It's in controlling the situation itself, in choosing when to speak and when to remain silent. The moment you react emotionally, you've given up control. And that's where N's philosophy diverges from the mainstream. Why do we argue? It's easy to think that arguments are about truth or facts. But according to N, arguments are rarely about logic. They're driven by something deeper, a need to protect the ego. People argue not because they have the truth, but because they fear being wrong. Being wrong means losing part of yourself, your identity, your sense of self-worth. This is what N understood. He knew that most debates are not about what's true. They're about dominance. It's not about winning with logic. It's about who can outlast the other, who can stand their ground the longest, and who can maintain control. But there's a twist. The person who stays calm, who doesn't give in to the emotional pull of the argument, is the one who really wins. This kind of power doesn't need words. It doesn't need to be loud. It's a quiet, controlled force. The Übermensch and the will to power N's idea of the Übermensch, the overman or superman, is often misunderstood. People think it's about strength, dominance, or sheer physical power. But N's Übermensch is someone who is not moved by emotions, not swayed by the need to argue or prove a point. He is someone who transcends the normal human impulses, someone who does not fight for the sake of fighting. At the heart of this idea is N's concept of will to power. This isn't about exerting physical force. It's about the ability to shape the world around you without needing to argue for it. The Übermensch understands that true power is not in the noise of words. It's in the mastery of self, in choosing when and how to engage. Take a moment to think about someone you know who is incredibly calm under pressure. When everyone else is shouting, they stand there, poised and collected. When they do speak, their words carry weight because they've already shown they don't need to prove anything. This is the essence of the Übermensch's power. Why silence is more powerful than winning. Now, let's talk about silence. It's a strange idea, right? How could silence be powerful? Isn't power about speaking out, about making your voice heard? The truth is, silence can be one of the most powerful tools in your arsenal. And understood that silence creates space. It creates uncertainty. It makes the other person question themselves. When you don't react, when you stay calm, the tension starts to shift. The other person becomes uncomfortable. They start to doubt themselves because they're expecting a response, but you're not giving them one. In that moment, you're in control. Let's break it down. When you stay silent in an argument, it's like holding a mirror up to the other person. They're forced to confront themselves, their words, and their own beliefs. It's not about winning with a clever retort or dominating the conversation. It's about allowing the other person to reveal more of themselves, their flaws, their contradictions, and that's where true power lies. Real-world examples. Masters of strategic silence. To understand this better, let's look at three famous figures who embodied N's idea of power through silence: Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Miyamoto Musashi. Socrates wasn't known for winning arguments in the traditional sense. In fact, he often didn't argue at all. He used a method that's still widely used in philosophy today, the Socratic method. Instead of directly confronting someone's beliefs, he would ask a series of questions that forced the person to reflect on their own reasoning. Through these questions, Socrates would expose contradictions in their thinking, making them realize their own lack of understanding. This wasn't about defeating someone with logic. It was about making them see the truth themselves. Steve Jobs had a similar approach. He wasn't interested in arguing for the sake of being right. He didn't waste time on unnecessary debates. Instead, he focused on making people see his vision. When his team at Apple wanted physical buttons on the iPhone, Jobs didn't argue with them. Instead, he led them to the conclusion that a touchscreen was the way forward. He didn't need to prove he was right. He made them realize it was their idea all along. And then there's Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary samurai. Musashi fought over 60 duels, and not once did he engage in a fight he wasn't sure he could win. One of his most famous victories came when he showed up late to a duel, allowing his opponent, Sasaki Kojiro, to grow frustrated. By the time they faced off, Kojiro was so blinded by anger that he made critical mistakes. Musashi didn't need to be the fastest or the strongest. He needed to control the situation, which he did through patience, silence, and strategic restraint. The hidden truth about arguments. At the core of this philosophy is a simple truth. Arguments are often driven by our egos. We argue not because we seek truth, but because we need to defend our sense of self. We fear that being wrong means we are weak, foolish, or insignificant. N's philosophy asks us to step back and reconsider this. What if being wrong didn't mean weakness? What if silence, restraint, and calm were the true marks of strength? The next time you find yourself caught in a heated debate, remember, true power doesn't come from winning. It comes from understanding when to engage and when to remain silent. It comes from knowing that you don't need to fight every battle to win the war. By controlling your reactions, you control the situation. You become like the Übermensch, master of yourself and the world around you. Conclusion. So, what can we learn from N's philosophy? The next time you feel the urge to argue, to defend your point, take a deep breath. Ask yourself, do I really need to prove my point? Instead of reacting in the heat of the moment, Pause. Let the other person speak. Don't rush to respond. By doing so, you may find that silence becomes your greatest strength because, in the end, the person who controls their emotions, who understands when to speak and when to remain silent, is the one who holds the real power. True power doesn't lie in the loudness of your voice, but in the quiet strength of your presence.